the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
This is Blair LaCorte, and this is Business Story of the Week.
Ladies and gentlemen, Blair LaCorte, the man, the myth, the legend, and I am your host, Joshua. Today in Business Story of the Week, question is, how can AI and entertainment industry go together? Yeah, it's quite an interesting question, but the man that we have here today has quite had the prolific experience and career. Blair LaCorte is a transformational leader with experience across industries like entertainment, aviation, AI, and defense. He excels at guiding companies through all business strategies from startups to IPOs, leveraging his cross-industry expertise to share best practices. Blair's leadership focuses on strategy, motivation, and operational alignment, driving significant growth and returns. He is also a dedicated mentor, investor, and national board member for coaching organizations. Blair holds an MBA from Dartmouth's Tuck School of Business and has completed executive coursework at Stanford. And today, Blair is going to share his experience, his insights, and his wisdom today with us on the show. Blair, thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm great, Joshua, and that intro is very flattering, but feels a little stuffy. And hopefully, knowing your personality, we're going to get a little less stuffy and a little bit more, execution and entertainment focus.
Yeah,
So,
well, we're going to try to unravel a lot into there because there is a lot to unravel, Blair. But first of all, everything else, with the path that you've taken, with the diversity of your experiences, Blair, I'm very curious, and I always start the show this way. Did the young Blair always know that he was going to go get into transformational leadership? And for anything, like really, did the young Blair always know he was going to get into entertainment, aviation, AI, defense, all of this? What was this like um, growing up as a young Blair LaCourte?
yeah, I would say that the answer to that question is absolutely not. In fact, the irony of maybe my career is I grew up, as many people have, with a divorced family, and maybe it was a little bit different than mine. They lived in the next town over, so I had eight
Hmm.
brothers and sisters, step
Hmm.
brothers and sisters,
Whoa!
half brothers and sisters, and both of my parents, my mother and my father, were entrepreneurs. So it was
Wow!
a wild ride
Wow!
where my mother had married an ex Vietnam pilot, and they had started an airline.
Hmm.
And so we were up at 4 in the morning trying to heat up the helicopters so that they could fly at 6 o'clock.
What?
And my father had started up a recruiting company, and his real passion was helping the underdog. So on Friday nights, when I
Mhm.
would go see him, he would actually have collected suit coats or sports coats, and we would go out and hand them out, and then we
Wow!
would sign people up to come in, help them to learn how to interview, to go out the next week and try to get jobs. So very, very
Wow!
different things. And what I said by the time I graduated high school is that I will never be an entrepreneur. I am never going to be in aviation. It's crazy. And this
Wow!
whole idea of recruiting, I learned a lot about people, but that's not for me. And irony of ironies is that when you look back at my career, it turns
Mhm.
out that my childhood and informed me on how to do change management, because with eight brothers and sisters, you never had an event that someone wasn't fighting and they weren't
Mm.
blaming other people in the room. So I was always learning how to facilitate and manage.
Uh-huh,
And in
uh-huh.
those two businesses, I learned a lot of the things that you're scared about as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. So later on in life, if you look at my career path, it may seem very linear, but I ended up running one of the largest, in fact, one of the largest private airline in the world now, which I said I would never be in aviation
Mhm, mhm.
again. I ended up working as a VC, working with entrepreneurs, again, saying I'd
Wow.
never be an entrepreneur. And I ended up, in part of a lot of different teams where when I look backwards, my childhood actually prepared me for dealing with ambiguity and helping others deal with ambiguity. So, in some bizarre sense, I think that the lesson I learned was sometimes it's not what you think you should be;
Uh,
it's being open to what you should be.
right.
And I've been really fortunate to have a career that I love.
And it feels like there's a lot of childhood foundations that was laid onto there that no matter how much you rejected, it felt like it laid everything that you could possibly ever need because you ended up actually embracing them and actually, like you said, seven, eight brothers, sisters, siblings, and you learned how to take care of people. It feels like you brought this on further into your career, handling people. What was it? First of all, I want to talk a little bit and unravel your aviation experience. What was that like? What were the pivotal moments in your life, basically, where you said like, okay, I'm gonna get into aviation. I've decided this is it, and did that really kick off things? What was the linear path, so to speak, when it came to entrepreneurship as well?
So look, again, we're all different, yet we're all the same. So I'll tell you
Mm-hmm.
my story in as an older person. I hate to say that, but with a little bit more perspective, you tell a story to yourself, and you also
Mm-hmm.
tell a story to the marketplace. And one of the hardest things
Mm-hmm.
about being an entrepreneur or being a businessman is that you're always being judged on success. So you're always
Right.
positioning yourself in a story of success.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue that the greatest learning moments come when you fail, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you continue to tell the story of your success and you don't share with people
Mm-hmm.
how you failed and what you did after that, I think you're
Mm-hmm.
doing them a huge disservice, right?
Right.
Because that's where, to me, the real learning moments come from. I would say my dad would often say, would you rather be lucky or would you rather be smart? And of course, you always say, I'd rather be smart. I figured this stuff out. But the reality is, 90% of the world, and I'm talking to a lot of entrepreneurs here, are basically in jobs that they need to sustain, and they don't make a lot of choices of what they do every day.
Wow. Of
Entrepreneurs are
course.
different. They go
Mm-hmm.
out to the edges and they
Yeah.
risk everything to
Yeah.
change the world. So they step out of that standardization. Really,
Yes.
that, we're not most of the world.
Right.
And I would say that we have different challenges. And the challenge is self awareness, to be
Mm,
honest, to
I
be
love that.
curious, and to
I love that.
learn very quickly. Because when you step outside of the bounds, both the upside and the downside come from things that you didn't expect,
Uh-huh.
right? So if you ignore things too long, they end up killing you. And if you don't actually or you're not actually open to things that happen to you, you don't accelerate as fast as you could. So when the answer to the question, would you rather be lucky or smart? Um, I'll paraphrase that because in his mind, I will call lucky. You picked a good macro and a good problem, and you found that's going with you, and that's when you're smart to go ride that wave, right? And
Right.
to make it happen. Because if you pick something that has a bad macro, or you're not solving a problem that you thought you were solving, it
Right.
doesn't matter how smart you are. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen people
Wow, I
grind
love that.
away and grind away and grind
I
away.
love that.
Now they'll come back later and say, I was a little bit too early or I
Mm-hmm.
was a little bit too late. But in reality, what they're telling you is that they weren't aware of the contextual environment and they thought just being smart would overcome it. So I would
I
challenge
love
everyone on
that.
the call to ask themselves
Mm-hmm.
every once in a while, every month or so, you ask yourself, I know I'm solving problems and I know I'm making progress, but
Mm-hmm.
what are the bigger things that are happening out there? And how
I
do I
love that.
actually, admit that nature is the major force here?
Mm-hmm.
And then you apply yourself into that. I would say when you look at it that way, and many people say, what are the things you can control? What are the things you can't? Even the things you can't control, you can understand,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
again, that comes in self-awareness and being honest. And I'll say one last thing. My coach in high school said to me, I wasn't a great athlete, but I really worked hard and I loved playing sports. But he said to me,
Mm,
the first step to being a great athlete is to be self-aware. The second step is to be somewhat delusioned because once you realize everything that's going on and everything you have to
right.
fix, you can get delusioned a little bit. The
Mm-hmm.
third step is where most people fail, which is taking the risk to believe in themselves and to actually take one step at a time and make a little progress every
Wow.
day. Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's not jumping out and trying something.
Right.
Steph Curry would say, you also miss 80% of the shots you take, but you don't believe you're going to make.
I love
Right. So
that.
that's
Wow.
where the conundrum comes. You have to believe, but you have to be aware enough to know when things are going wrong, is it something you can control or something you can't control? And that's when you make your adjustments. So again, you asked me earlier, I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I did know that I wanted to make a difference in people's lives, and I wanted to solve problems, and I wanted to build teams. And so I can look at my career and say that's how I made my decisions, for
Wow.
better or for worse. And there are some days I think that left a mark. But again, what I would say to everyone, my number one piece of advice is to, you know, be curious and be self-aware.
I love that because we get to a little too focused on the micro, like you said. We're thinking about like being smart about things. I'm a good businessman. Coming up with the little stuff that makes a business successful.
Well,
But
you feel like you're making progress and you get a hit of
yes,
serotonin. And
mm,
that's great because that's what
hmm
we love. We're
hmm
addicted to competing and we're addicted to making progress. But
right,
again, the greatest athletes in the world can step back from that
right,
and say, I may be making progress, but am I heading in the wrong direction?
right.
Because you have to see the big.
It's almost like navigating a plane through a storm, right? Like you have to see what's around you. You have to see the big picture, and I love that you always pointed out. I love that you very emphasized on self-awareness, and I think that is not spoken so much. It's not talked about when it comes to entrepreneurship. What would be an advice you would say to our audience and listeners today? And like, okay, I'm running a pretty okay successful business, but I don't feel like I got here because I was self-aware. I'd like to be more self-aware now, and maybe this would lead to success. How can I start practicing self-awareness in entrepreneurship?
Well, look, it's like everything else, it's a habit,
Mm,
right? So, and using again the sports analogy, great teams go back and watch the films. They play the game and then they watch the films. And
I
so
love that.
going back and giving yourself a little space where you're not in execution mode, but you ask yourself, what did I learn in the last month,
hmm
right? Or
hmm
you ask your team, I used to do this in team meetings, before you tell me about what you're doing, tell me about what you learned this month.
Wow,
I
I
want
love
you to
that.
think about that
I
because
love
there's
that.
insight that's happening all the time. And when
hmm
you add up a bunch of insight, you may find a pattern. And when you find a pattern, then you're able to predict the future, or at least you're able to bet on the probability of the future. And if
hmm
you're going to be faster than everyone else, you're going to have to take these little micro risks. And that starts again with self
Interesting.
awareness. So, taking that moment every to sit down and look at what you wanted to do last week and what you did, what you learned from it.
Wow,
Um, and have your team do the same thing, I think is just a great habit.
I love that. I love that. Taking back, reviewing, always looking back to what you can do better. If you made a mistake, I mean, it's always entrepreneurship is rife with a lot of mistakes, and but really it's a matter of again learning from those mistakes. And I love that you always you point out that that's what puts people that what separates you as an entrepreneur when it comes to success. Blair, I want to talk a little bit about the industries that you got into. It said you were
Mhm.
into the entertainment industry. How did that influence your approach leading AI companies? It's quite far off, I understand this, but it's very interesting. Could you talk to us a little bit about a story that stands out that got you into the entertainment industry, and how did that lead into tech companies?
Sure. And it probably makes sense if I'm going to add value is to, talk about the truth. And the truth is,
hmm
if you looked at my resume, you would say, okay, he graduated from a state school, but he was at the top of his class. And then he went to a big training program at General Electric and he got
Okay.
really, really, lucky. He met Jack Walsh, who was the CEO, and
Okay.
he
Okay.
actually saw that he had potential and helped him a little bit. And after that, of course, he went back to a major MBA school, and getting out of an MBA school like Dartmouth, top 10, he went into consulting because there, that's really where the funnel comes from. And if you look at things that way, they can make sense, but they're not the truth, right? The truth is that, I went to a state school because my grades weren't good enough to get in any place else. And
Yeah.
that motivated me to actually say, what do I have to focus on to actually rehabilitate myself
Right.
because I didn't have very many choices. So I
hmm
focused really hard and I did not lament. This is another thing that I learned from athletics. Partners with a lot of professional athletes in a sports bar I have, and the great athletes, they play a play and then they strip the emotion and they remember the play.
That's it.
The
That's
play
it.
was, yeah, I didn't do well in high school. I had a 2.2. Let's go back and look at why I didn't do well in high school. Well, I was working for my two of my families are entrepreneur, and I was playing sports. And you know what? I didn't have the tools at that point to excel. So when I got to college, I focused on getting a 4.0.
Okay.
And so that 4.0 allowed me to get into a training program. The training program I got into was with General Electric. I got into that program because the only course I really struggled with was finance. So I picked the number one program in the world for finance people.
Right.
Now, in order to get into that program, I had to work really hard because I wasn't one of the number one people in the world. But I knew that
Wow.
everyone's biggest strength is their weakness, and everyone's biggest weakness can become their strength. And so I
Wow.
said, where is my weakness? My weakness is in finance. Let's go learn finance so that no matter whether I go into a financial career, I will always be able to talk to the CFO or the banker or the P firm that's going to buy us, and I'll know the terminology. So I made an
Wow.
investment in myself. A lot of
Wow.
people could have said, hey, I stepped back. I was a
Hmm.
very good marketer. I was a very good salesperson. I should have gone into
Hmm.
those type of businesses, and my career would have gone up faster. I made $22,000 a year in G's training program.
Wow.
But by doing that 2.5 year program, I not only developed a skill that I wouldn't have had,
Hmm.
it lengthened the base. So it made me stronger, right?
Right.
Because now
Right.
you weren't going to, I wasn't just a marketing and sales guy. I could be a GM. And
Hmm.
so that was a big, big investment that I made. And I would challenge people to think about that. Where is your biggest weakness? Because your biggest strength is always, when I say your biggest strength is your weakness, it's always what you'll go towards. You'll
That's it.
try to make everything fit your strength because you're comfortable there. So
Right.
look at your weakness and make that your strength as well.
I love that.
When lacrosse, I wasn't a great player in high school. But when I went to college, I played left-handed for my first year in college, and I wasn't
Whoa.
left-handed, and I got beaten up every single day. Now you
Mm-hmm.
have to use both hands in lacrosse, but I went dominant left-handed, and I
Hmm.
got beaten up, and I didn't make the varsity
Hmm.
because of that. But the next year, I
Hmm.
was stronger and more confident, and all of a sudden they couldn't tell whether I was left-handed or right-handed. By the time I
Hmm.
graduated, I was captain of the team in a Division
Wow.
One college. Right.
Very
So
cool.
again, my biggest strength was I was a great runner. My biggest
Hmm.
weakness was I didn't have the stick skill that
Hmm.
some of these talented athletes had. So I
Hmm.
had to figure out how to change that. Now, this is advice I'm giving for people that are earlier in their career. Now, when you're jump into a startup, again, you got to do everything,
Yeah.
right? So it's a little bit tougher. Or later in your career, you want to find out what you're strong at and build teams around it. But when people look at my career and say, "How did you go from General Electric to the one of the largest hardware companies in the world, which was Sun Mike?" Well, first of all, the consulting company we grew from 20 people to 1,800, became the
Right.
largest in the world. Then Sun
Wow.
Microsystems, one of the largest hardware companies, took over Autodesk, which we quadrupled in market cap within the first 4 years, one of the largest software companies in the world, and so on and so on. The way you do it is you don't let go of what your strength is when you're going to try something new,
Wow.
and you take risks. When I was leaving consulting, I was reorganizing mobile upstream, which was Canada, the accounting center, all the exploration stuff.
Hmm.
And when I got a
Hmm.
call from the head of strategy at GE and said, "Look, I have a job for you. I think you should take a year off from consulting and go to this job." And I was on many of your people won't remember, I was on a payphone. I said, "The plane's going to leave. I'm in. I believe in you." My dad said, "Work for people I'll learn from." Hang up the
Right.
phone. It turned out that that company was Sun Microsystems, not Sun Oil. So the first day I walked in,
What?
that's how I got into tech. If I
What?
hadn't taken the risk, I would never have gotten the tech background.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
again, I keep talking about, a lot of people want me to talk about technical things. I talk about human things
I
because
love that.
business is just a sport, and
Hmm.
sports are played by
Hmm.
athletes. And the
Hmm.
ability for an athlete to know themselves and to work as a
Hmm.
team is really what success comes. Now,
I love that.
again, there are some people who get lucky. We'll all look at them and we'll say, "Oh my God, that guy, he just made all this money." It's a very small percentage that are just lucky and not smart at the same time. And another statistic that the Wall Street Journal has published an article on is that most entrepreneurs don't succeed more than once
I love that. I
because
love that.
build themselves enough that they go to the second thing and the second and next thing and the next thing, it's really difficult to get huge wins. I would say sometimes you're earning, you're
Mhm.
just making money and it's all going well. Sometimes you're learning.
Mhm.
You may not make a lot of money. The whole key is not to burn,
That's
because the
it.
second you stop playing and you sink and you drown, it's over. You break yourself physically or mentally, then it's over. You break the law,
I love it.
then it's over.
I
So
love it.
think about it. You can always be winning. Sometimes you're earning, sometimes you're learning.
Mhm.
It's great when you're doing both. But, again, our privilege is the ability to play. It's
That's
the
it.
ability to be doing what we're doing. And as long as we don't stop moving our legs, we'll always have another. I
I
never
love it.
feel guilty when someone makes a lot of money and I don't. It's a trap, right? The gift is to be able to do what you love over.
Fantastic. I mean, Blair, this has been rife with amazing, amazing wisdom. And I love that you always related it always ties back to the macro, right? It always ties back. Like you said, people want to talk about technical stuff with you, but you talk about what's the human side of it all. I love that you keep relating this to sports. You keep relating it to, to life. But like you said, like we are privileged to be playing the game of life. And I truly love that. I truly love that. That's the message that you're sharing with us today. Blair, where can we connect with you? Where can we learn more about you? Are you on LinkedIn? Would love to be able to share on your journey.
Sure. The best place to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn. And
Mhm.
if you see something on there in my past that I can help you with, I always say to people, look, if it's something around strategy that I can help you with, I'm happy to spend 15 minutes talking about strategy. And a lot of times it's not even about strategy. You'll see something, you say, can you hook me up with this person? Send me a note.
I
I've
love
been a
that.
lot of places, and if it makes sense, I'll let you guys figure it out. I don't, I can help you with that.
And of course, you are the managing director at LaCorte Ventures, and there's a lot of opportunities that our audience and listeners can tap into. Blair, we'd
Yeah,
love to
and
keep.
it's listen, and the other piece that we have is that, in my retirement I get to do what I want to do, and I'm the vice chair of the largest and most
Mm,
prestigious longevity institute in the world, which is the Buck
wow,
Institute. If you're interested in that and you want to engage, I'm also on the board of the Kroc Institute. We are the ones who do all the strategy for the U.S. around how to deal with global competitors like China. If you're
wow,
interested in that, I'm open to that. And then we have a coaching business where you're always welcome to listen in, even if you're not looking for a coach. We live stream a lot of the sessions we have just so people will be able to hear the other entrepreneurs and what they're doing.
Blair, I love it. The time that I have had with you is just rich in wisdom. And of course, I invite our audience and listeners to check out Blair. Go connect with him on LinkedIn. If you have any ideas, make sure to link up with him. And Blair, thank you for coming on the show. I truly enjoyed all the wisdom and the macro view of things, not just all the technical aspects.
Oh, hey, listen, thanks, Joshua. And it was a privilege to talk to you guys. So hopefully I've given you something to think about, to be self-aware about.
I mean, that it's been a lot, Blair, and truly, truly something that as a reminder as well. And especially that earning and learning part. By the way, you don't always earn, but you can always learn. I love that part. Yeah, it is a great reminder. I think not just to me, but to all our audience and listeners as well.
Okay. All right.
Well, Blair, thank you so much, and to all our audience and listeners out there, thank you for watching the episode, and we will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.